Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
The notification on my phone lit up like a neon sign in hell. Your ride has been rated 2 stars. 2 goddamn stars for driving some drunk oil executive's daughter home from her daddy's charity gala while she puked champagne into my cup holder. Welcome to rock bottom, James Holloway style. 3 months ago, I owned a $22 million ranch outside Austin. Had 200 head of cattle, a trucking company that hauled freight across 3 states, and a wife who looked like she stepped off a magazine cover. Tonight, I'm scraping vomit out of my 2018 Honda Civic, wondering if I can afford gas to get home to my studio apartment above Chang's Chinese takeout. The fall from grace wasn't gradual, it was a straight drop off a cliff, courtesy of my ex-wife Alicia and her slick lawyer boyfriend Trent Maddox. They didn't just take half in the divorce, they took everything. The ranch, the company, hell, they even got custody of my dog Rex. Judge ruled I was financially unstable and emotionally volatile. Apparently, punching a wall when you discover your wife's been screwing her attorney counts as emotional instability in Texas family court. But tonight felt different. Tonight, some drunk socialite forgot her Prada purse in my back seat, and returning it was about to change everything. The address led me to a gleaming glass tower in downtown Austin. Holloway Freight Lines, read the sign. My blood turned to ice water. That was my company, or used to be. I'd built it from nothing, 1 truck and a dream, back when Alicia was still pretending to love me. The security guard, a heavyset guy named Pete, who used to wave at me every morning when I owned the place, didn't recognize me in my Uber driver uniform. "I'm returning a purse," I said, holding up the designer bag. "Passenger forgot it." Pete squinted at me. "You look familiar." "I get that a lot." I wasn't ready for the recognition, the pity, the questions. He buzzed me up to the 15th floor. The elevator ride felt like ascending to my own execution. When the doors opened, I stepped into what used to be my world. The receptionist, a blonde named Cindy who I'd hired personally 3 years ago, looked up from her desk. Her face went white as printer paper. "Mr. Holloway, what are you doing here?" "Returning this." I set the purse on her desk. "Owner left it in my car." Cindy's eyes darted around nervously. "Sir, I don't think you should be here. Mrs. Holloway, I mean Miss Richardson, she's got a restraining order." "Relax, Cindy. I'm not here to cause trouble. Just doing my civic duty as an Uber driver." The words tasted like battery acid, but I kept my voice level. That's when the elevator dinged behind me, and I heard the voice that haunted my nightmares. "What the hell is he doing here?" I turned slowly, savoring the moment. Alicia stood there in a power suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her perfectly styled auburn hair framing a face that could launch 1,000 lawsuits. Beside her stood Trent Maddox, tall, silver-haired, wearing a smile that made me want to rearrange his dental work. "Hello, darling," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Love what you've done with my office." Alicia's green eyes flashed with fury. "You're violating the restraining order. Trent, call security." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone to show the Uber app, "I'm here on official business. Your friend forgot her purse in my chariot." I gestured to the Prada bag. "Funny thing about rock bottom, the view's pretty clear from down here." Trent stepped forward, puffing out his chest like a rooster in a designer suit. "You need to leave, Holloway, now." I studied him for a moment. 6'2", maybe 190, soaking wet, soft hands that had never done anything more strenuous than sign legal documents. "Or what, counselor? You'll sue me? Already been there, done that, got the poverty t-shirt?" "James!" Alicia's voice had that tone she used to use when she was about to ask me to do something I didn't want to do. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I laughed, a sound like broken glass in a blender. "Harder? Sweetheart, you took my ranch, my business, my dog, and left me driving drunk college kids around for tip money. I'm not sure it gets much harder." That's when Cindy cleared her throat. Mr. Holloway, there's something you should know about the company." Alicia spun around. "Cindy, don't. Your father died 3 months ago," Cindy blurted out. "He owns 75% of Holloway Freight. The lawyers have been trying to find you." The world tilted sideways. My father, who'd walked out when I was 12 and never looked back, owned 3/4 of my company? The company I'd built with my own sweat and blood? "That's impossible," I said. "He bought in as a silent partner 5 years ago," Cindy continued, ignoring Alicia's murderous glare. Used a shell company. The paperwork's all legal. You're his sole heir. I felt something shift inside me, like tectonic plates rearranging themselves. For 3 months, I'd been the victim, the poor bastard who lost everything. But victims don't own controlling interests in multi-million-dollar companies. Villains do. I looked at Alicia, whose face had gone pale beneath her makeup, then at Trent, who was staring at Cindy like she'd just announced the apocalypse. Well, I said, straightening my Uber driver polo shirt, this changes things, doesn't it? The law office of Brennan, Schultz and Associates looked like something out of a legal thriller, all dark wood and leather-bound books that probably cost more than most people's cars. I sat across from Margaret Brennan, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd been handling my father's affairs since his death. Your father was a complicated man, James, she said, sliding a thick folder across the mahogany desk. He kept tabs on you, even after he left. When you started Holloway Freight, he saw an opportunity to invest anonymously. I flipped through the documents, my head spinning. Stock certificates, board appointments, financial statements, all bearing the name of a shell company called Lone Star Holdings, which apparently belonged to one Samuel James Holloway Sr. Why didn't he ever contact me? Margaret shrugged. Pride, maybe. Shame. He knew what his leaving did to you and your mother, but he never stopped caring. When he got the cancer diagnosis last year, he made sure these papers were in order. So I own 75% of my own company? You own 75% of the company that was built on the foundation you created, yes. But there's a complication. She pulled out another document. Your ex-wife has been making some interesting financial decisions as acting CEO. I scanned the papers, my anger building with each line. Equipment loans against company assets. Mortgages on property I'd thought was paid off. Consulting fees paid to Maddox Legal Services, Trent's firm, totaling nearly $500,000. She's bleeding the company dry, I said. It appears so, and there's more. Margaret handed me a manila envelope. These came from a private investigator your father hired before he died. He suspected something was going on. Inside were photographs that made my blood boil. Alicia and Trent at expensive restaurants, charged to company credit cards. Weekend trips to Cabo and Vegas, all billed as business expenses. And then the ones that really twisted the knife, photos of them at my ranch, in my bed, while we were still married. How long? I asked. The investigator's report suggests at least 18 months before your divorce was finalized. 18 months. While I was working 16-hour days to keep the business afloat, she was planning my destruction with her lover. While I was buying her flowers and trying to save our marriage, she was already dividing up my assets with a man who specialized in taking everything from people like me. I stood up, the leather chair creaking behind me. What are my options? Margaret smiled, and for the first time since I'd walked into her office, I saw something predatory in her expression. Well, as majority shareholder, you have several interesting possibilities. We could call an emergency board meeting, remove her as CEO, freeze all company accounts pending a financial audit. Do it. James, you should think about this. Legal warfare can get ugly. I laughed, remembering Alicia's face when Cindy dropped the inheritance bombshell. Margaret, they already took everything from me, made me a laughingstock in my own town, left me scraping by in a studio apartment, driving drunks around for grocery money. Ugly? I'm just getting started. That afternoon, I drove to Frankie's boxing gym on the east side of Austin. It was a dive. Exposed brick walls, heavy bags hanging from chains that had seen better decades, and the permanent smell of sweat and determination. But it was honest, which was more than I could say for most places these days. Frankie Morales was in his 60s, built like a fire hydrant with hands that could crack walnuts. He'd been a middleweight contender back in the day, before a car accident ended his career and started his second life as a trainer. I'd been coming here since the divorce, working out my frustrations on heavy bags instead of lawyers' faces. You look different today, Jimmy, Frankie said as I wrapped my hands. Less like a kicked dog, more like something with teeth. I told him about the inheritance, about the photographs, about the plans forming in my head like storm clouds on the horizon. Frankie nodded slowly. Revenge is a dish best served cold, they say. But sometimes, you gotta heat it up a little first. He pointed to the heavy bag. Show me what you got. For the next hour, I pounded that bag like it owed me money. Every punch was for a betrayal. Every combination for a humiliation. Every round for a piece of my life they'd stolen. By the time I was done, my knuckles were raw and my shirt was soaked with sweat. Better, Frankie said. But you're still fighting angry. Angry gets you hurt. Cold and calculated. That's how you win wars. He was right. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about justice. About showing two people who thought they were untouchable that actions have consequences. I drove home to my studio apartment. But instead of feeling sorry for myself, I sat down at my laptop and started planning. First, I researched Texas corporate law, learning about shareholder rights and fiduciary responsibilities. Then I dug into public records, tracing the financial moves Alicia and Trent had made with my company. What I found was even worse than Margaret's documents had suggested. They weren't just stealing from Holloway Freight. They were systematically dismantling it, selling off assets, and funneling money into accounts I couldn't trace. The ranch I'd built from nothing was mortgaged to the hilt. The trucking fleet I'd grown from 1 vehicle to 30 was being sold off piece by piece, but they'd made one crucial mistake. In their greed and arrogance, they'd assumed I was beaten, that I'd crawl away and lick my wounds while they enjoyed the fruits of my labor. They were about to learn the difference between a victim and a villain. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Heard you were sniffing around the office today. Some dogs never learn. Stay away, or we'll have you arrested. I smiled, recognizing Trent's writing style from the legal documents that had destroyed my life. I typed back, "See you at the board meeting, counselor." Then I opened a new browser tab and started researching private investigators. If they wanted to play dirty, I was about to show them what dirty really looked like. The private investigator I hired was nothing like what I expected. Sarah Chen was a former Austin PD detective who'd gone private after a corruption scandal left her disillusioned with the force. She worked out of a small office above a Korean barbecue restaurant, and her rates were reasonable enough that even an Uber driver could afford them. "Your ex-wife and her boyfriend aren't exactly subtle," Sarah said, spreading photographs across her desk like a dealer shuffling cards. 3 nights this week at Morton's Steakhouse, charging everything to company cards. Weekend in Napa Valley, billed as a business conference. And this, she slid a particularly damning photo across the desk. Trent Maddox signing papers at First National Bank, using your company as collateral for a personal loan. I studied the image. Trent in his expensive suit, pen in hand, probably borrowing against assets I'd spent 15 years building. How much? $2.7 million. Used it to buy a lake house in Lago Vista. The audacity was breathtaking. They weren't just stealing from me. They were living like royalty on my dime, while I counted quarters for laundry money. "There's more," Sarah continued. "Your wife's been meeting regularly with someone else. A woman named Julia Morse. Ring any bells?" The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Jules. I'd hired her as head of accounting 6 years ago, back when the company was growing fast, and I needed someone I could trust with the books. Smart, ambitious, and apparently holding a grudge I'd never seen coming. "I fired her 2 years ago," I said. "Caught her skimming money from client payments." Sarah nodded. "Well, she's been having a lot of coffee dates with your ex-wife. Very cozy conversations. Very private locations. The pieces were starting to fit together. Jules had access to all our financial records, knew every weakness in our system. When I'd fired her, she'd threatened to make me pay. I'd thought she meant a wrongful termination lawsuit. Turns out, she'd been thinking bigger. I want surveillance on all 3 of them," I said. "Full coverage. I want to know where they go, who they talk to, what they eat for breakfast." Sarah quoted me a price that made me wince, but I agreed. This was war now, and intelligence was ammunition. That evening, I drove out to the ranch for the first time since the divorce. It sat on 500 acres of prime Texas hill country, with a main house I'd designed myself and outbuildings that had housed my dreams. Now it belonged to Alicia, at least on paper. I parked on the county road and walked the fence line, staying technically on public property, while I surveyed my former kingdom. The place looked different, more manicured, less lived in. Alicia had always wanted it to look like something from a magazine, rather than a working ranch. That's when I saw them. Alicia and Trent on the back porch, sharing a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. They were laughing about something, probably me, the poor bastard ex-husband who'd lost everything and now drove other people's cars for a living. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Not for any legal purpose. I was too far away for the audio to be useful. But I wanted to remember this moment, this image of them celebrating my destruction. Because when this was over, when I'd taken back everything they'd stolen, I wanted to show them this video and remind them how it felt to be on top. My phone buzzed with a call from Margaret Brennan. "James, we have a problem. Alicia's lawyers filed an injunction to stop the board meeting. They're claiming you're not mentally competent to exercise your shareholder rights." I almost laughed. Based on what? Your history of emotional instability, the wall-punching incident, your current employment status. They're painting you as someone who's had a breakdown and can't be trusted with corporate decisions. Can they do that? They can try. We'll fight it, but it'll take time. Weeks, maybe months. I watched Alicia lean over and kiss Trent. Her hand.
It was one time at the company retreat.
Your coworker posted a photo. You're wearing this shirt.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Hand resting on his chest like she owned him too. How long do I have before they can liquidate everything? At the rate they're going? 6 months, maybe less. 6 months. Half a year to watch them finish dismantling everything I'd built, while lawyers argued about my mental state in air-conditioned courtrooms. That's when I realized something important. I'd been thinking like the old James Holloway, the one who played by rules and trusted the system. But the system had failed me. The rules were written by people like Trent Maddox, designed to protect people like Alicia Richardson. It was time to write some new rules. I hung up on Margaret and called Sarah Chen. "I need you to dig deeper," I said. "I want to know everything about these people. Their secrets, their weaknesses, their fears. I want to know what they're ashamed of, what they're hiding, what would destroy them if it came to light." "James, that's getting into some gray areas legally." "Sarah, they stole my life. They're stealing my company. And they're doing it all while the legal system ties my hands behind my back." I watched Alicia throw her head back and laugh at something Trent whispered in her ear. "I'm not asking you to break any laws. I'm asking you to find the truth. All of it." There was a long pause. "It'll cost extra. Bill me. I'm about to come into some money." After I hung up, I sat in my car watching the people who'd destroyed my life enjoy the fruits of their betrayal. But instead of the familiar rage, I felt something else. Something cold and calculating and infinitely more dangerous. They'd made me into a victim. Now I was going to show them what happens when victims stop playing by the rules. The old James Holloway would have driven home, filed the proper paperwork, and waited for justice to take its course. But the old James Holloway was dead. They'd killed him with their lies and their lawyers and their casual cruelty. What was left was something else entirely, something with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Sarah's surveillance photos arrived via encrypted email 3 days later, and they were pure gold. Trent Maddox wasn't just stealing from my company, he was running a side hustle that would make a mob lawyer blush. The photos showed him meeting with Carlos Mendez, a known fence who specialized in moving stolen construction equipment. My construction equipment, according to the GPS tracking data Sarah had pulled from the company's fleet management system. "He's been selling your bulldozers and excavators to Mendez for months," Sarah explained over coffee at a diner near her office. "Reporting them as damaged or stolen, collecting insurance money, then selling them on the black market for cash." I studied the photographs. Trent shaking hands with Mendez outside a warehouse in East Austin. Money changing hands. My equipment being loaded onto unmarked trailers. How much are we talking about? Conservative estimate? $2 million in equipment, another $1 million in fraudulent insurance claims. My blood pressure spiked. While I was eating ramen noodles and driving Uber to pay rent, this bastard was stealing my bulldozers and buying lake houses. "There's more," Sarah continued. "Your ex-wife isn't as innocent as she pretends. She's been having an affair with someone else too." She slid another photo across the table. Alicia in the arms of a man I didn't recognize, younger than Trent, better looking, wearing the kind of clothes that screamed trust fund baby. "Who is he?" "Marcus Webb, heir to Webb Oil, 26 years old, worth about $50 million on paper." The pieces clicked into place. Alicia wasn't just cheating on me, She was cheating on the man she'd cheated on me with, trading up from a lawyer to an oil fortune. Does Trent know? Sarah smiled grimly. Based on the timing of these photos, I'd say no, but he's about to. I leaned back in the diner booth, mind racing. This was better than I'd hoped. Not only did I have evidence of their crimes, I had leverage to turn them against each other. I need copies of everything, I said. Photos, financial records, GPS data, all of it. What are you planning, James? I smiled, feeling something dark and satisfying settle in my chest. I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve. That night, I sat in my studio apartment and crafted 3 separate packages. The first went to Trent Maddox, delivered to his law office by courier. Inside were photos of Alicia with Marcus Webb, along with a note. Thought you should know who you're really in business with, a concerned friend. The second package went to the insurance companies that had been paying out claims on my stolen equipment. Photos of Trent with Mendez, GPS tracking data, and a detailed timeline of the fraud. The third package was the most important. It went to Marcus Webb himself, delivered to his downtown office. Photos of Alicia with Trent, financial records showing how she'd been bleeding my company dry to fund their lifestyle, and a simple message, "This is who you're sleeping with. Might want to get tested." Then I sat back and waited for the fireworks. I didn't have to wait long. My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. with calls from blocked numbers. I let them all go to voicemail, then listened to the messages over coffee. Trent's voice, tight with barely controlled fury. "I know this was you, Holloway. This is harassment. I'm calling the police." Alicia, crying, "James, please, we need to talk. This isn't what you think." Jules Morse, her voice shaking with rage. "You have no idea what you're messing with. Back off, or you'll regret it." But the best call came at noon. Margaret Brennan, my lawyer, sounding almost giddy. "James, whatever you did, it worked. Alicia's legal team just called. They want to negotiate. Apparently there's been some kind of development that's changed their position." I smiled, imagining the chaos I'd unleashed. Trent discovering his girlfriend was cheating on him with an oil heir. Marcus Webb realizing his new toy came with expensive baggage. The insurance companies starting to ask uncomfortable questions about missing equipment. "Set up a meeting," I said. "Somewhere public. I want witnesses." We met at a coffee shop in downtown Austin, one of those trendy places where lawyers and executives like to conduct business over overpriced lattes. I arrived early and took a corner table where I could watch the entrance. Alicia walked in first, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually perfect makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her designer outfit looked wrinkled. Trent followed behind her, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. They sat down across from me without ordering drinks. "You son of a bitch," Trent started, but Alicia put a hand on his arm. "James, we need to talk about this situation," she said, trying to sound reasonable. "There's been some misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings?" I laughed, loud enough to draw stares from other customers. "Is that what we're calling theft now? Fraud? Adultery?" Trent leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You're playing with fire, Holloway. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually, I know exactly who I'm dealing with." I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo Sarah had taken that morning. Jules Morse meeting with 2 men in expensive suits outside a downtown office building. "Your friend Jules has been busy. Turns out, she's got connections you might not know about. Connections that wouldn't be happy to learn their money is being traced by insurance investigators." Alicia's face went white. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" I repeated, savoring the moment. "I want my company back. I want my ranch back. I want my life back." "That's not going to happen," Trent said. "The divorce settlement is final." "The divorce settlement was based on fraudulent financial statements," I interrupted. "When the forensic accountants finish going through the books, when the insurance investigators finish their reports, when the IRS starts asking questions about unreported income, well, let's just say your legal problems are going to make my mental competency hearing look like a parking ticket." I stood up, leaving them sitting at the table looking like they'd been hit by a truck. "Enjoy the rest of your day," I said. "Both of you, because I have a feeling your days are about to get a lot more interesting." As I walked away, I heard Alicia hiss at Trent. "You said he was broken. You said he'd never fight back." Trent's response was lost in the noise of the coffee shop, but I didn't need to hear it. I could see it in their faces, in their body language. in the way they looked at each other like strangers who just realized they were standing in quicksand. The old James Holloway had been broken. The old James Holloway had trusted the system, played by the rules, believed that good people got good outcomes, but the old James Holloway was gone. What they were dealing with now was something else entirely. Something that had learned their rules and decided to write better ones. Something that was just getting started. The emergency board meeting took place in the conference room at Holloway Freight Lines, the same room where I'd once planned expansion routes and celebrated record profits. Now it felt like a courtroom, where I was both prosecutor and judge. Margaret Brennan had done her homework. The injunction against my mental competency had been thrown out when 3 different insurance companies filed fraud complaints against Trent Maddox. Hard to claim someone is mentally unstable when their accusations keep turning out to be accurate. I sat at the head of the conference table, wearing the one good suit I still owned, while Alicia and Trent huddled with their legal team at the other end. The 3 other board members, old friends who'd invested in my company during the early days, looked uncomfortable but determined. "Let's get started," I said, calling the meeting to order. First item of business, removal of Alicia Richardson as CEO of Holloway Freight Lines. "You can't do this," Alicia said, her voice cracking. "I've been running this company for months. I know every aspect of the operation." "You mean you know every aspect of dismantling it?" I replied, opening the folder Margaret had prepared. Item by item, asset by asset, until there's nothing left but debt and empty buildings. I began reading from the forensic accountant's report. Equipment sold below market value to shell companies. Consulting fees paid to non-existent firms. Executive bonuses that violated every corporate governance standard in the book. 2.7 million in unauthorized loans, I continued. 400,000 in fraudulent insurance claims. 600,000 in personal expenses charged to company accounts. One of the board members, an old friend named Bill Martinez, who'd been with me since the beginning, shook his head in disgust. "Alicia, how could you do this? James built this company from nothing." "I was trying to save it," she said, tears streaming down her face. "The market was changing. We needed capital." "You needed capital for a lake house and trips to Napa Valley?" I interrupted. "You needed capital for your boyfriend's legal fees and your friend's consulting contracts." Trent finally spoke up. "This is all circumstantial. You can't prove." "Actually, I can." I nodded to Margaret, who activated the conference room's projection system. The screen filled with photographs, bank records, and GPS tracking data. "Your meetings with Carlos Mendez, the equipment sales, the insurance fraud. The FBI has been very interested in your business practices, Mr. Maddox." The room went silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. Trent's face had gone pale, and I could see sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cool temperature. "The vote is simple," I continued. "All in favor of removing Alicia Richardson as CEO and installing James Holloway as interim CEO, say aye." The 3 board members voted aye without hesitation. Alicia abstained, and Trent wasn't a voting member. "Motion carries," I said. "Alicia, you're fired. Security will escort you out." But I wasn't done. Not even close. "There's one more item of business," I said, pulling out another folder. "The matter of the ranch." Alicia looked up sharply. "The ranch was part of the divorce settlement. You can't touch that." "Actually, I can." I opened the folder and began reading. "The ranch was purchased with funds from Holloway Freight Lines, company money used for personal real estate acquisition. That's embezzlement, Alicia, and embezzled assets can be recovered." Her lawyer started to object, but I cut him off. "The mortgage payments, the renovations, the landscaping, all paid for with company funds while you were CEO. All documented, all traceable, all illegal." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city where I'd once been a somebody, then a nobody, and was now becoming something else entirely. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, turning back to face them. "You're going to sign over the ranch. You're going to return every penny you stole from this company. And you're going to disappear from my life forever." "And if we don't?" Trent asked. I smiled, and I could see him flinch at the expression on my face. "Then you go to prison, both of you, along with your friend Jules, who's been very chatty with the FBI about whose idea this whole scheme was." Alicia's head snapped up. "What? Oh, didn't you know? Jules cut a deal yesterday. Testified that the whole plan was your idea, Alicia. The affair with Trent, the corporate theft, even the divorce strategy. She's painting herself as an unwilling accomplice who got in over her head. It was a lie, but a convincing one. Jules hadn't talked to the FBI yet, but she would. They always did, when the walls started closing in. She's lying, Alicia whispered. Maybe, but she's got documentation. Emails, text messages, recorded phone calls. Enough to bury both of you. Menand, I walked back to the table and sat down, steepling my fingers like a movie villain. The choice is yours. Sign the papers, make restitution, and walk away. Or take your chances with a federal jury. But choose quickly. The FBI's patience has limits. Trent looked at Alicia, and I could see the exact moment their partnership dissolved. The moment he realized she'd been playing him just like she'd played me. The moment he understood that loyalty was a luxury neither of them could afford. I need to call my lawyer, he said. You are a lawyer, I pointed out. And you're fired too. This company will no longer require your services. Margaret slid the settlement documents across the table. These are very generous terms, considering the alternative. Alicia picked up the papers with shaking hands. Her signature, when it came, looked nothing like the confident flourish she'd used to sign our marriage certificate 10 years ago. Trent signed next, his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. Pleasure doing business with you, I said, standing up as security arrived to escort them out. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. As they left, Alicia turned back one last time. You've changed, James. This isn't who you used to be. I smiled, remembering the man I'd been 6 months ago. The trusting husband, the fair employer, the guy who believed the world was fundamentally just. You're right, I said. The man you knew died the day you betrayed him. What you're looking at now is what you created. I hope you're proud of your work. After they left, I sat alone in the conference room, surrounded by the wreckage of my old life and the foundation of my new one. Outside, Austin hummed with the energy of people going about their normal lives, unaware that justice had just been served in a glass tower downtown. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen. Saw the news about Maddox's arrest. Nice work. I smiled and typed back. Just getting started. Because this wasn't